Even after all these dead, all this mourning and defiance, still we learn no lessons. We remain stuck in the John Lennon response to terrorism. They blow us up, we sing Imagine. Our politicians still refuse to accurately identify the sources of the problem, and polite society remains silent or dumb. This country gave asylum to the Libyan parents of Salman Abedi. Their son repaid that generosity by killing 22 British people, one for each year of life this country had given him. We need to think far more deeply about all this. Eastern Europe doesn't have an Islamic terrorism problem because it doesn't have much Islam. France has the worst problem because it has the most Islam. Are we ever going to draw any lessons from this? Apparently not. For the time being, the game is to be as inoffensive as possible. And the rot isn't just within the Muslim communities. Consider all those retired British officials and others who shill and are in the pay of the Saudis and other foreign states, even while they pump their extreme versions of Islam into our country. Our enemies are serious. It's high time we became serious too.
What lessons are we failing to learn?
Well, every imaginable one. We don't want to listen to what the extremists say. We don't want to believe that they mean what they say. We still seem to be, even after all of these years, in this strange cycle. Hazel quite rightly says we're not preparing to fight this ideology, but I mean, our politicians, I think, from all parties, are very reluctant to even name the ideology in question. There's a concerted effort after an attack like that on Monday night not to listen to what the sort of things that are said that would impel somebody to do something like that, to listen to what they say, what they mean. Last month, the national act of mourning in Westminster Abbey after the Westminster terrorist attacks, just down the road from here. The Dean of Westminster, on behalf of this nation, stood up in the pulpit of Westminster Abbey and said, "We may never know what would drive somebody to do this." Sorry, we do know. We know why somebody like Khalid Massoud did what he did on Westminster Bridge and outside the House of Parliament. We know why somebody like this young man did what he did on Monday night in Manchester. They keep telling us. It's just we don't want to listen.
So what is it? Is the Islamist ideology?
Yes, and many...
Don't we know that? Don't we recognise that?
No. And but particularly we don't want to recognise where it comes from.
Where does it come from?
It comes from the religion. It is the worst possible interpretation of the religion, but it comes from it. And we are very reluctant in our society to face up to that, because underneath all of this, there's something else happening. The politicians are talking about the technical issues to do with terrorism and security. But the publics of Europe, including the public in Britain, are thinking totally different things. They're thinking at the moment, for instance, how can it be that we may bring a couple of Libyans who may have suffered under Colonel Gaddafi into our country as asylum seekers, and maybe they're pro-Britain, maybe they're the most pro-British people ever, but maybe their child will turn up to a pop concert one night and blow a bunch of women.
But how would you ever know that?
We don't. This is the issue.
I'm not sure what the policy follows, that we shouldn't have let them in the first place.
The policy issue is, as I say, that the public are wondering whether this whole idea of mass migration, of the borderless world and all these sort of things is such a good idea. And I think the publics are coming to a different conclusion to the politicians. It's right we have the security questions, but we should also, as a country, be thinking about the deeper underlying things. And finally, if I may say so, when Hazel says we have to tackle this underlying ideology and fight it and so on, I agree. But we've got to appropriately designate the problem.
But Douglas, you know, it's all very well to have rhetoric. Rhetoric can really inflame the situation. You need a careful, measured view with a proper programme and properly resourced
Hazel,
as well.
Can I just say, the PREVENT programme is a prime example of this. I've had all sorts of criticisms of PREVENT, as have you. But what is one of the unanimous issues with PREVENT? There is almost total pushback against the policy from day one, from the self-appointed leadership of the Muslim community. That is one of the overwhelming things with PREVENT. People say, I've got a problem with this bit, a problem with that bit. No. most people that you hear from within the Muslim communities, there are terrific examples of people who stand out from this, are against having any policy. It's not they dislike a bit of the policy, they don't want the policy.
I disagree.
And your
I
neighbour,
disagree with you again.
All right, let Hazel Blair speak.
I disagree with you again, because what you're saying is that the people who are anti-prevent, if you like, are the majority voice. They might be the loudest, but they're not the majority of voice. There are a lot of good, decent people in the community, young people who've become...
But within the leadership,
they have
Hazel.
become absolute stars, and when they get the opportunity of a leadership platform, they are amazing young people.
Okay.
Women in the same place. You can't just paint everybody with the
No,
same brush.
and I
It's a
didn't
very
do that.
dangerous
Let me
path to
bring
go
in,
down.
It shows the
You know?
strength of the ideology
Absolutely.
and the importance of countering it, but you can't counter it if you simply think that it is solvable by Hazel Blairs or Amber Rudd or anyone else coming up with a counter ideology. These people believe they're acting in the name of their God, and they may not listen to a British minister or a former British minister. And we've got to have a line to them that breaks right through to the heart of their warped ideology.
But what does that mean? And that's a metaphor. What does that? No, I want to find out what Douglas. I want to know what the policy response is, not the metaphor.
The first, if I may say so, the first thing is that politicians and others have to acknowledge that when these things happen, instead of sort of we're learning from them, coming together and so on, we say we didn't want this sort of thing to happen. We never wanted to get to this place where we had people, including first and second generation immigrants in this country, blowing people up at pop concerts. And there is no single way to deal with that, but I can tell you one of the worst ways to deal with is when people like, unfortunately, Andy Burnham, now the mayor of Manchester, in campaign not only to scrap the prevent strategy, but not even suggesting something to go in its place. The current strategy is about the best strategy going. It has all sorts of flaws, but I'd much rather have it than people who believe we should have no strategy at all.
On that we are agreed.